Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Living with me, your host, Jared Warne. So it is great to finally be back. It has been a while since we've done an episode. What it is, it's just my day job as I'm a singer has just been that manic at the minute, and getting these gigs together for the year and sorting things out. I've just had literally no time to put into Paranormal Living. So it is great to finally back everything sorted so we can move forward now and carry on with the podcast and the live streams and everything else we've got going forward at Paranormal Living. So I'm excited for this. So thank you for listening, guys, and being patient with the podcast, because I know a few people asked when the next podcast was out. So one of the things we are going to talk about today is our recent investigation we went on, myself and Bob. We went to a place called Newsham Park in Liverpool, which was a place I've always wanted to go. But it's always sold out. Every group what goes there, you know, they have different paranormal groups which you book on with. It's always sold out. But my sister was lucky enough to get me a ticket for my birthday. So we had a pretty and amazing night. I'm going to go into detail. I've documented everything what happened. So I'm going to explain everything what happened to you. But I want to also know if you have ever been to Newsham Park or heard of it. You know, get in contact with us. Let us know your stories. You know, did you have any experiences while you were there? Was nothing really happening? You can get us at paranormallivinglive@gmail.com. It's a brand new email address. We've had to change the email address, unfortunately. So paranormallivinglive@gmail.com. So you can get us on there. Share your photos, videos if you want to come onto the podcast as a guest. Talk about any paranormal activity you've had, stories, experiences you'd like to share with us. You know, please do get in contact. And also we are on Facebook, as I've always mentioned, Paranormal Living, and YouTube Paranormal Living TV. But everything's in the description below, as you all know by now. But it is, as I mentioned, great to be back. And one of the things I also want to talk about today is we've got a few things planned going forward on regards to Paranormal Living Live and doing the live feeds and the live investigations and quite a few other things. So I'm going to tell you all about that in this week's episode as well. But we are here to talk about Newsham Park. But just before we do that as well, I need to get everything down so don't forget, is we are sponsored, of course, by Paranormal Technology. So a lot of you guys who've seen the live streams and the live things we've done on Facebook investigations, all our equipment, everything we use is from Paranormal Technology. Everything from the REM Bear to the Spirit Box, music boxes, everything you could possibly think of comes from this company. And I literally spoke to Mark yesterday, Monday, and he's got this brand new equipment coming out, these shadow followers and all this brand new state-of-the-art, highly technical stuff, which he's going to be sending over to us so then we can give it a try out on our lives. And the one good thing is about Mark, it's not about money for him. You know, he wants to give everyone an opportunity. So some of them people who want to go paranormal investigating, and then many of you know, you go on eBay, Amazon, and everything's triple the price. Everything, you know, like things you buy, spirit boxes, they're like 300 quid, for example. And with Mark, it's not about that. That's £70. And off the top of my head, and it's just, he wants to give you that chance to go on an experience and work with this equipment and obviously go out and see for yourself and find the truth for yourself. So, you know, make sure you do check him out in the link below, which is Paranormal Technology. And if you show him that you've liked our page or listened to the podcast, he'll give you 10% off your first order as well. So, absolute win-win. So, big shout out to Mark, absolute top guy. And really, really happy to be working with him. So, Newsham Park, guys. So, as I mentioned, this is a place I've always wanted to go. Always wanted to investigate. You hear some stories. I didn't do any research pre-hand because I wanted to go in there with an open mind and, you know, see what you pick up yourself and what you sense in regards to mediumship and stuff. So, going in there, all I knew is that it used to be an orphanage and that it was a hospital. And literally that is it. And I knew they had a naughty boys corridor, which I'm going to talk about as well in this. So I knew a couple of things, but literally nothing else about the place. I know Bob did quite a bit of research, but we do have a bit of history, a bit of a background into Newsham Park, just to give you an idea if you've never been there or not too sure on Newsham Park. So Newsham Park was officially opened in 1874 as an orphanage for children, which lasted through the First World War, Second World War, and a lot of the children, especially in the late 1800s, their fathers used to work on the docks at Liverpool and were seamen, and they sadly passed away, and then obviously they had no other parents, so they'd be sent to the orphanage, which was one of the main reasons they opened opened it up as an orphanage for the children who lost their parents to see. And then, as I mentioned, this lasted for quite a lot of years, and it wasn't until the early 1950s where it stopped as an orphanage. And then 1954, they opened it up as a hospital, and then they were working with people with mental health problems and opened a psychiatric ward in there. And this lasted until 1997. And then I think it was in the 80s, one of the other hospitals closed down. So then the patients got moved then to Newsham Park as well. And then in 1997, as I mentioned, the hospital closed for good, which is now used as a paranormal event hotspot with constant events running through the year. I think there's more or less like 6 days a week. I think there's got events going on at Newsham Park and to different parts, of course, to the hospital. So that's just a bit of a rundown, a bit of a background history of Newsham Park, just to give you an idea. But as I mentioned, it's always sold out. Every time you try and get there, it's always sold out. So when we got there, you go into the big main hall, which I guess would have possibly been the reception area or something along them lines. They didn't actually tell you which bit we were in at that point. So we go in there, and then they decided to split everyone into groups, sort of tell you a bit about how the night's going to work. So the first part is you go off in 2 groups, and then they ask who's been on paranormal investigations before, who's never done an investigation. And surprisingly, there's quite a lot of people in the group. So I think there was about 50 people, roughly off the top of my head. And probably half of them had never actually been on a paranormal investigation or were skeptics. So I thought that was cool because it brings something completely different to the table as well. So then, after going through that, they split us into 2 groups. And then we first went up to the psychiatric ward. That was the first place they took us. And walking around, it's obviously quite dark. And it's definitely really cool. Interesting vibe about the place. But at first, there's more excitement than anything, I think, as you're walking around. And, me and Bob are just having a chat, and we're going to obviously see what happens. So as we get to the psychiatric ward, which is, if you lose the group, you'd probably get lost if you've never been there, because it's just going through doors upon doors, up flights of stairs. There's a lot of walking and a lot of twists and turns going through Newsham Park to from where we started up to the psychiatric ward. So once we got on there, they put some equipment down. So they had an EMF meter, they had some cat balls, there's a K2 meter on the floor, as well as a few other things. And then they go around the group and ask us to all introduce ourselves. So the investigation's starting now, so our people start calling out and asking the spirit to come forward and things like this. So at this point, I felt quite relaxed, although Bob was getting a bit jittery more than anything. And then what it was, if I can just try and explain this psychiatric ward, it was just a long room, and there was a door behind where me and Bob was stood into another little room, which was weird. You did get a weird feeling, and then someone did mention they were seeing something in front of that door. And then Bob was, like you said, Bob was getting a bit jittery at this point. And then there was a door sort of directly across from us, which leads into the nurses' quarters. And majority of this part of the investigation, people said they could see a figure stood in the doorway. Personally, I didn't see anything myself, but a lot of people saying they were getting weird things from that doorway, and if someone was stood there. And like you say, it's this long room, and then at the far part of the room, there is a door and like a little alleyway thing into this part of the room where we were, and we were right at the end. So after calling out, quite quickly we were getting knocks. So they were asking, could you tap once for yes, twice for no. So this is going on, people calling out. So at first, you are a bit dubious because it is dark. Even though you can sort of see people in that sense of the shadows, naturally you're a bit dubious, like is someone tapping on the floor, just things like that. So the questions were coming out, and things like, are you happy we're here? And it did say no. And then it's like, do you want to speak to us? Like, knock for yes. And then the EMF meter started flashing, as if like with the change in the hot air or cold air, whichever it was. And this happened a few times, and it was quite bright when it was going off. So something was triggering this EMF meter. And as I say, no one's moving, and you have to be pretty close. It was as if something's blowing into the EMF meter to make it spark up. And then we had one of the cat balls flashing, which became quite a regular occurrence throughout the evening, actually, with the cat balls. And then we started hearing footsteps, and this was a weird bit. So as I mentioned, part of you is a bit dubious. You're like, is someone tapping their feet and making it sound like there's some footsteps? Because, sometimes you don't know. But then the thing what swayed me away from that was we heard footsteps walk around the circle, and there was footsteps not far from me, sorry. And there was no one moving in where we were, where me and Bob were, and the couple of people next to us. And you could hear the footsteps physically moving around the circle, and then moving from in the middle of the circle, where we all were, to out into the corridor. And at one point, the weirdest one was it sounded like a kid running, as if they were like on one of the horses and going chugga 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 chugga. I think whoever it was there to sort of play with us a bit and have a bit of fun. But with being in there, I think there was a few spirits have the possibility of coming through. So I don't think we was communicating with just one person. I think there was a culmination of people coming through. So we had this running round and the footsteps going off. And then people mentioned about where me and Bob were stood, about someone in the doorway. And then Bob feels the backpack being tugged. And then he looked at me and said, "Did you just pull the backpack?" I said, "No, I haven't. And literally, my hands are down by my side. I'm freezing." And he wouldn't believe me. And I literally had not touched the backpack. He said, "Someone's just pulled the backpack, like nudged him back." I said, "Right, okay." And then a few people then mentioned over the course of this, I think we were there like 45 minutes in this room, being touched on the face. Someone pulled my jeans at one point, and then Bob thought I was talking to him, so everyone started laughing. But yeah, my jeans got pulled, and then you could feel this cold air going around the whole circle, and the energy building and moving around us, and the footsteps are still going, and there's shuffling, there's noises from everywhere. And we're getting some really, really good evidence. Like you say, at first I was a bit dubious, just as you naturally are. And the way the night was going, I'm like, this looks like we're in for a good night. We can't explain a lot of these noises, what are going on. And then one of the things I find amazing though is you get this really high energy. Everything's going, and we're getting these noises. Like I said, these people are seeing things. Things are going off. But as soon as it gets to this, woof, it ends, and it's just unbelievable. Like the activity we were getting, and then it was more or less time to move on anyway. But we did end up going back into the psychiatric ward, but it was an amazing experience to have, and to hear the footsteps as clear as day. The last time I experienced that was when we went to a place called Marlow Lodge, and we was in the hotel, and we'd finished doing the recording for the show and stuff and the live streams, and then we heard footsteps across the whole landing of the hotel. Absolutely phenomenal. Couldn't explain it. There's no one else in the hotel apart from us four who were down in the bar area. And that's the only time I've ever heard it before that. And then to hear them going around the circle and around you, and people to be touched. And because at that point, part of me was like, it might take a bit of time just to sort of warm up. But whoever it was communicating with us, they were definitely active and definitely showing us that they were there. So then we moved back into the green room, and then they split everyone up into smaller groups. So I think it was groups of 6. I think we was in 6 or 8. And everyone goes off to different locations in the hospital. So the first place we did in our smaller group was the Laundrette, which I'm excited for. A bit of a smaller group. I think it's probably easier to work with, maybe. And as I mentioned, we go down into the Laundrette. So the feeling in the place, from what I remember, it wasn't too different. You get the feeling that there's something there, but obviously I didn't anticipate what was going to happen, which I'm going to obviously tell you about. And then, so we're just walking around the Laundrette area and having a look around, taking some pictures, and I'm just talking to Bob about stuff. And then the guy who was, I think he was called Gareth, set up an Alice box, which is an app. I think it's an app where they say spirit can use this to bring words out. So, maybe if you're asking a question, that answer could come out there, kind of thing. So they're using the Alice box. He had the cat balls, and then he did a thing called a human pendulum, where you stand, so you have someone in front of you and someone behind you, so working with energy, and then you ask spirit which way for yes, and then you feel like you're being pushed, and which way for no. So it's definitely cool, especially when some people do look like they're being physically pushed, and they're not just rocking, it's going woof. So that was interesting. So they did the human pendulum, and as I say, we had the Alice box and the cat balls. So in the Laundrette, we just the lights go out, and then we sort of calling out then. But literally, very, very quickly, the cat ball started flashing in front of one of the doors, and there's nobody there. There's only us in this room, in this laundrette area. And then this was the first place where I just felt I started to pick stuff up myself. And I picked up about this lady, so I asked a question, like, is there a lady here who used to work in the laundrette? Whatever the question was. And the cat ball started flashing. And then the guy started leaning forward for yes. So I started just asking questions then. So the first thing what sort of come to me, I'd ask a question. So we had the alley spots going off, and there was some weird stuff coming out of there as well. And then we asked, did she pass away at when it was a hospital? And it's like, yes. And the story we sort of got from asking these questions is that she was a worker in the laundrette, and she was pregnant at the time, and then she went into labour, because that was it. Water come through the Alice box, so we're like, did you go into labour while you was working? And she said yes, and that was it. And then it was, did you pass while in childbirth? And it was like yes. So we're sort of picking up a story now, and we're sort of working with what's going on. And then there was also a little boy come through, which was interesting. So I at first thought, I wonder if they're connected, if it's the lady and her son. But this little boy was working in here when it was the orphanage. And what we were getting from that was that he'd had an accident while in the laundrette and then passed away. So this story is unfolding, and I got the name Teddy, and that's when I asked, is the name Teddy? And the guy moved yes. So this is all going on, and then all of a sudden this gentleman comes in. So we're working with 3 different people here, and then the gentleman was connected to the lady, because that's what I asked. I'm like, are you connected to this lady? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, was this your wife? It's like, yes. Because one of the cool things is as well, not everything we asked was just yes. We did get no's as well, but we sort of, like you say, we're building up what's happening now, and I'm like. And I just got this really sad feeling, and it went quite cold. So and then I was like, "Are you stuck here?" And it was like, "Yes." I'm like, "Are you looking for your wife and the child?" Like, yes. And the feeling you sort of picking up is like, right, okay, he's passed. He's come back here to find his wife and his child, but they're still separated in that sense. So they're still split up. And he's searching for her, she's searching for him. And what's cool about this is the cat balls are going off. So because we'd even ask, like, could you set the cat ball off? I was like, yes, and the cat ball would go off. So we're getting the evidence there and coming through. And I'm like, do you need help crossing over? And he was like, yes. And I'm like, this is awful. I've never really been in this situation before. And then everyone else is obviously asking questions, and I just went into my own little corner, sort of walking around, and I started saying a prayer then, because I'm like, if this is the case, he's stuck here, he's trying to find his wife. He could have been here, we don't know how many years. He needs help, and he needs to be reconnected with her, and then we can move him on to the other side and be happy and together again. So I started saying a prayer then. I asked my granddad to come forward, and my guides and helpers and stuff, to bring the light in for the gentleman, to be connected to his wife. So I'm saying this prayer, and then I'm asking stuff, and I'm sort of in this little zone to myself, because I thought we can't just go out of the room and leave him there. It's not fair, And we did said the prayer, and then the weirdest thing happened. So as I'm asking for this light to come around, everyone went bitterly cold, and it was like an ice ring around the circle. So I'm like, right, it's working. If everyone's picking up on the same sensations. And then the weirdest thing happened is, so as this had happened, and then when it all seemed to go, and we're doing the human pendulum, the guy stopped moving. So we'd ask a question, and we were getting very, very minimal movement. So I'm like, it felt like I'd actually done a good deed while being there, even though we're there to do an investigation and obviously go on a ghost hunt in that sense. But to be able to do that, bring the light in and help these people cross over, and I'm like, and everyone's getting a similar sensation. I'm like, yeah, I've a really, really good deed. I'm really happy with that, because, like I said, I just felt it was unfair just to leave them there, and you wouldn't want that if you'd passed. My only one concern was that people tend to just think negatively sometimes, and like was one of the guys in the group was like, they're taking the mickey, they're not answering us for a reason, they're just playing with us, and I'm thinking they're not. it's maybe he's had enough talking. Maybe he talks to everyone who goes in there and he's not getting the help he needs, and he's just like, right, forget it. And that happened a few times over the course of the night. People seeing things in a negative way rather than a positive way, or maybe that they just don't want to communicate. So then after the laundrette, we finished there, and that was one of my favourite bits of the night as well. The laundrette, definitely for activity and the things we were experiencing. We then moved back up to the psychiatric ward. So we got to there, and they were doing a thing called glass divination. I think that's how I pronounced it right. Where they had a table there, and it had yes, no, goodbye. It's a bit like a Ouija board. Not my cup of tea. I've spoke about these on the podcast twice. Some people like doing them, some people don't. I'm one of them. It's not my thing, and I don't like to bother with anything like that. So Bob then decided to jump on the table. He was up for that one. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So I stood out of the way. I didn't even want to be sort of in the circle of people crowding around him. I didn't want to be involved in it at all. Like within the energy of the board and the table and stuff. So they were on the table, and the weirdest thing started happening to me was, so I'm just stood on my own, and there's a cat ball, say, 2 feet away from me, and I was just swaying back and forth. So you're in the energy, and you're swaying. Quite a few people will sort of have probably experienced this, swaying back and forth, and I'm like, it's weird, and the glass is moving, and the weirdest thing what was happening, they were asking a question, I'm swaying to yes or no, and then they go into the answer. It was a weird thing. I've only experienced it once or twice before, but it was proper rocking. Couldn't stop. So they're on the board, I'm just in my own little world. And then the guy come over to me, he's like, I can see you swaying, are you alright? I said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, I'm quite sensitive to like the spirit world and stuff. He's like, yeah, fine, no problem, and then just left me. And then that's when he started picking up on stuff again. And then I mentioned about this name. I think the name was Jonathan or something like that. And then when they were on the board, I said to Bob, I said, just ask, is the name Jonathan? And it was like, boom, yes. And the guy went, I just want to say something. Weirdly enough, he said, one of the names what's quite commonly comes up is Jonathan. I'm like, all right, okay. So I'm just still swaying. And then all of a sudden, the cat ball next to me goes off. So I'm like, right, okay, we're getting this evidence. And then, again, because we're back in this ward, we're picking up on the energy. Again, we've got footsteps. We've got people sort of seeing things, and these taps coming from places, and this shuffling. So this is all going on around us as well. So the energy is like probably at its peak. And this person were coming through, and then all of a sudden, like, it's weird. I think a lot of people may do investigations or are very sensitive to picking up on things, how your emotions can change in the split seconds. So they're doing the board, like you say, I'm just watching, and then all of a sudden I just got this feeling that I was scared or very uncomfortable, and I don't know what it was, and as if someone was scared of somebody. And that's one of the things I asked them to ask, and the story what come out through their board was that this gentleman they were talking to, he was scared of one of the main doctors, and he used to obviously be quite frightened of him, but he's still there because he's trying to find the doctor, or something along them lines. But the energy was just a quick change, and I'm like, you can go from feeling happy to crazy to just absolutely down and sad and upset, and it's just crazy. And then I'm also thinking about some of the people who may still reside here in the psychiatric ward, possibly don't even know they've gone. And they're probably still living in that zone of, this is where they spent their life. And, and I think coming towards the end of that, because like you said, Bob did get some really, really good evidence through that board with the 2 people he was on. It then made me think of, if they're still stuck here and they're still living that normal life, that is the matron coming around or the doctor, and they're like, oh, it's the bedtime now, we need to get into bed, because the energy again just sort of ceases. Or they're coming around saying you need to stop talking to these people, or you need to get in your bed, whatever. And that's the sort of vibe you sort of pick up in this area, which would make quite a lot of sense, how the energy can go from you getting a lot of things going on to boom, just stopping. But definitely going back into there was, again, that's probably one of the more active places where you seem to be got quite a lot of activity. But another amazing experience, and I know Bob did enjoy the board and the glass thing, and like I said, they got quite a bit of evidence. We then moved on to the nurses' quarter, and surprisingly, this was one of the quietest ones of the night. And as we're walking down there, the guy's like, this is the most active part of the building. You will get non-stop activity down here. So naturally, you're going down thinking, right, someone's going to be touched, something's going to happen, something extreme's going to happen. And so walking down the stairs, and we get down to the bottom of this sort of corridor area where the nurse's quarter was, and then he's explaining to us about some of the things what had happened. And then we start calling out, and it was a bit quiet, and he had one of the laser grid pens against the wall. But we got bits of noises, and then there was a cat ball on the stairs, and the cat ball went off, which I think it went off about 5 times in this nurse's quarter. So we were getting bits through, but nothing was where, if you say, like, can you give us a knock to communicate with us? It wasn't like that. I don't know if it was more residual energy on this part, because it would have been people just constantly going up and down the stairs, the nurses up and down, and I think maybe that's more what it was. And then I remember one of the guards saying that he could see a figure further up the stairs. So we pulled the torch out, had a look, we couldn't see anything. And then, although where me and Bob were stood, because we moved to a different part of this like corridor, that there was a door behind us, and the door did tap a few times as someone was knocking on it. Part of me was like, it could possibly have been the bag, if the rucksack may have tapped the door. But at one point Bob did move, and we still got the tapping on the door. So we got a bit of evidence there. And then the cat ball went off again, and then that was sort of it. It went a bit quiet, as I mentioned on that bit. We didn't get overly too much. I think someone did get touched as well. Then as we going back up the stairs, the guy's telling a story to do with the stairs, that apparently one of the nurses who worked there did sadly take her own life, where she hung herself and come tumbling down the stairs sadly, which would make sense possibly of why it could be quite active, but we didn't really experience anything like that ourselves. But quite a somber moment as you're walking up the stairs, thinking like, what a terrible, terrible story. So then we go back up the stairs out of this corridor, and we're going to the naughty boys corridor. So in the naughty boys corridor, it's just a long corridor, and there's loads of little rooms on each side. And apparently what happened was, when it was an orphanage, the nuns, if any of the children misbehaved, they would put them in these little rooms. And I can tell you, these rooms were tiny. They put them in these little rooms and just leave them in there for sometimes hours, days. No food, no toilet. They just leave them there apparently. And just before we did start, the lady was mentioning that they got quite a bit of activity on the group before us, where they were doing table tipping, and the table was moving round. It fell over a few times and stuff. And then a few people went into the little rooms where the children were put if they misbehaved. So I'm watching the table. We started with the table tipping. Bob had gone in a room on his own with one of the cat balls. And this was probably the quietest, literally it was the quietest part of the whole investigation. And I'll tell you actually, the spookiest bit of this investigation at this point was, there was the door you come out of the psychiatric ward. There's a door there, and it's a really, really uneasy feeling as you look at this door, as if someone stood there, or someone's watching you, or something's happened. Can't explain it. And then I mentioned it to one of the guards, and she said, weirdly enough, she said, I get the same thing. It's just that door, and there's something really uneasy about it, and something what makes you feel a bit like anxious or something. And I said, yeah. But we didn't get any noises from there. It was just the genuine overall feeling there. So then people start calling out then. So me in my mind is, right, we're probably working with children, and you want to talk to them like children. Like I'd talk to my daughter. I've got a 5-year-old, and I talk to them like, like that. So we start calling out, and my thing was, if you'd like to come forward, to play with us, you can maybe pull some jokes on us, just things like that. And we're asking people doing the table tipping, we're asking just to maybe tap on the table, or just give us the signs that they are there. But it was very, very quiet, and I think the table nudged a tiny bit, but it wasn't a lot. And part of, you could put that down to possibly yourself, like your hands shaking or the way you stood, because the table was quite low. And one of my little, I guess, his bugbears is then people start asking for too much, because obviously if we're dealing with energy, And if they have just had a crazy experiment and a crazy things going on in just before us, where the children, if they are knocking the table over and things are going bang and people are having experiences, they could just be genuinely tired and that energy is drained a bit, so it's not as easy to start moving things and giving us signs that they are there. And that's when I think some people take it a bit far, where they're like, will you push the table over? Can you knock the table? Can you move the table? And it gets a bit more demanding rather than just, let's see what happens. If something happens, something happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not the end of the world. And then that's where it was going, and that's when I was like clocking off a bit. And I know Bob was a bit the same. It's just, like you say, we're dealing with the spirits of children, and people are being a bit too over demanding, and that's what they're not liking, and that's probably what they're scared of because they've been through that in the orphanage. So that was sort of the basis of the Naughty Boys corridor. It was quite quiet, nothing really happening. But just, I guess you get more sensations, more that. Although, actually, I've just remembered, when we were stood around that area, quite a few people mentioned, including myself, about the knees going warm. Like, you could feel the energy around where your knees were. So I'm 6 foot, which is where probably a child would be, stood up, and you got that warm sensation around your knees, and quite a few people picked that up as well. So then we moved out of the Naughty Boys corridor, and we go into the last room. And so this is the last experiment before you can wander off on your own. So as we get down into this particular room, the first thing is, sat there on a table as everybody walks in, is a Ouija board, and I'm like, nope. Because like I say, my own personal opinion, I don't agree with them, and I really don't like them. So I'm like, great. And then everyone in the room, to me, this sort of killed the narrative because no one else in the room liked him and wanted to be in the same room as it. Or they were against him. And the woman's like, does anyone want to try it? I'm like, absolutely not. And she's like, you can come forward. I'm like, I'm okay. And everyone's sort of really, really spread out in this room because we didn't want to go anywhere near it. Which I think really they should have said, there is going to be a Ouija board used tonight. If you want to go in this room, you can do. If you don't, you don't have to go in the room. Because I'd rather not been in the room with it. Because this room, honestly, the energy in this room was horrible. It was dark, it was heavy, it was a different world compared to different places in the hospital. So then she's like, right, okay, we'll go for a wander. So she took it. So in this main room, there were some beds on the side, and then you go through another little door, and these, is it a gurney? I think, the tables where you'd put like a deceased body on. So there's this table there, and then this guy comes in, because she's obviously told him that we didn't want to do the Ouija board. The guy comes in, starts talking to us a bit about the place, and we was in this room, and there was this like machine. I've never seen it before, I didn't have a clue. And he was telling us it was the electric shock room where they used to do the electric shock therapy. And as I mentioned, this whole area of the whole place was not nice. You just got some horrible feelings. It was just not nice. It was sad. It was heavy. It wasn't great. I didn't like it at all, and I think quite a few people did feel the same as well. So then we moved into a place called Kitty's Ward. So this is all sort of connected, which is where apparently, so not long before it shut, is where in this sort of area, some of the patients who had really, really bad mental health issues, this is where they would stay. And Kitty's Ward is named after a patient apparently called Kitty, who had a baby while she was in the hospital and she was on this ward. So I think there's about 4 rooms in this little sort of communal area. And again, the energies, it's just this whole area, this energy is thick and it's different compared to many different places in the hospital. And then we move into a proper ward. So then they set up a few trigger objects. They did the torch to try and get spirit to turn the torch off. We had cat balls and a few other things. But the energy completely dropped. So even though you're sort of picking up sort of feelings, we're not physically getting anything in that at this point. And no one had really been in this part of the room. But it was just, I think the issue is because of the Ouija board thing and everyone didn't like it. It killed it a bit. And then everyone's just sort of stood around and, we're calling out and stuff. It wasn't the same as what it had been in the previous couple of places. And, that's my own personal opinion. So then we come to the end of that bit and had a little break, and it's like, right, you can go on your own free will now. You can wander around, go to different places. So funnily enough, one of the rooms I wanted to go back into was Kitty's ward. So as I mentioned, we were in that bit and the room where the gurney thing was and the electric shock room, just because I wanted to see if we could pick something up when it's just me and Bob. Now we're just on our together doing our own little thing, and away from the Ouija board room. But we didn't get much, to be honest. Everything was sort of dying down now, but I think because there's been that many people there and going through different experiments, investigations, it was just the energy's just sort of lagging a bit. And then we set up a few trigger objects, what we brought ourselves. We had motion detector, this sensory light. If you walk past it, or you have to make it physically trigger. The cat ball we had with us, and a few other bits in the bag we took with us. We weren't getting much. Like you say, there was some on the camera looked like orbs, but part of me was like it possibly could be dust because it's not really been cleaned. This place, it's just sort of left a bit derelict. So then we moved into the Kitty's ward, and we did get the light going off, the trigger light, which you have to make it go off yourself because you have to walk past it or put your hand over it. That did go off twice, I think it was. So we were happy then. So right, we're getting something. Then all of a sudden, people obviously start walking through. Which obviously nothing you can do about that because everyone's obviously on a mission to go around and see the different rooms. But it was hard work because at one point we was just there on our own. Everyone had left us alone, and then we must have had about 20 people walk through more or less at the same time, and then they were staying in the room obviously while we're trying to conduct this little bit of investigation. So then we moved back up into the psychiatric ward because we'll finish there. It might be a bit quieter in there, and it was just me and Bob in there. So as we're in there again, the energy just completely stopped. And you just got that feeling that they're not there anymore. And that was sort of our last bit of the night, really. The energy just dropped that much, I think. And like as I mentioned, there've been that many people in there doing different experiments. It is probably the case that, they just, the energy was just struggling to come forward and, give us that last bit of whatever it was people were after. So that is it for our little review on Newsham Park. It's definitely worth going. If you've never been before, if you can get tickets, it's an amazing place. It's cool. The activity we got, I was, with majority of the time, I was really happy with. Especially in that psychiatric ward, and picking up on things and people having some crazy experiences. Things like that was pretty immense, and again, evidence of spirit life around us. And then we also, I would like to go back myself. I believe you can private hire it, from what I gather from doing some research from today, that you can private hire it yourself. So I'm going to see if we could do something as Paranormal Living, maybe with our medium Denise, where we could possibly live stream it and, go into the different places in our own group, kind of thing, with people we work with regular. But like I say, guys, if you've never been before, it's definitely worth going. And I think it is going to be one of them places, like, even next time we get to go again, you could get something completely different. So each time you go, it could be, as I mentioned, different every single time. So definitely really worth going to have a look. So there's a few other things I did want to mention before we do end this episode. It has been a lot longer one than normal. But I mentioned about a charity thing we're going to do. So me and my few Elvis friends, as many of you know, I'm a singer and do Elvis. We've been talking, and one of the guys mentioned he wants to come on an investigation with me and join us on somewhere. So and then there was another Elvis popped on. Another Elvis. It sounds so weird, doesn't it? Another one of my friends come on and mentioned it. So what we're going to do a charity live stream from a location. I've got the location in mind, so hopefully we can announce it in the next week. We'll be raising money for charity, and you'll have 8 Elvis tribute artists in haunted location, possibly getting all shook up. Thought that one myself. But it's gonna be amazing, and like you said, to raise money for a good cause as well. So that's gonna be pretty epic. We also are now doing every Sunday at 2 p.m. GMT time, Card Sunday. So this is a new thing we did on Sunday for the first time, and I've been obviously working on my development, and I want to start doing more with my mediumship and the card readings and stuff, working with tarot cards and stuff. So that is a brand new thing we're doing. So this is every Sunday 2 p.m. English time, GMT time, where we'll be doing card readings for an hour or two on our Facebook page, Paranormal Living. So the description's in below if you've not been on the Facebook page before. But that's every Sunday. Now we're going to be doing tarot readings, so I can obviously work on my development and hopefully give you an answer if you have any questions or would like a little reading over online. That's absolutely fine. So I hope you can join us on that one. And then we also have 30 East Drive and the Ancient Ramin coming up, as well as a few other interviews as well, as I mentioned, which is it's all coming together now. So I can obviously put all the thoughts in, and I'm going to do a little review on the next episode as well. So there's a place in Stoke-on-Trent which is a haunted museum, and me and Bob will be going down there. They're doing overnight investigations, as well as you can go down in the afternoon, and have a tour around this haunted museum. So we're going to be going there as well, do a little interview with them. That's lined up as well, and then a bit of a review about some of the things we experienced. So, but if you go on their Facebook page, Haunted Museum Stoke, I think it's called, they do get quite a lot of activity because they put quite a lot of videos on, from CCTV, what people have experienced, and they do get quite a lot there. So I am excited for that one as well. But guys, thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and the little review about Newsham Park and what we experienced and what happened. Take care, love and light.